Hey guys, so I don't really know how to feel about this chapter right now, but I do know that the more I keep reading Wano, there's a part of me that kind of suspects that Oda doesn't really care about power scaling. I think I'm beginning to see that he doesn't care about fights as much as some of the readers do. He cares about Luffy fights. He cares about Luffy fights. I mean, the amount of effort that he put into that Luffy versus Katakuri fight, regardless of the result, like you can tell he was like, oh man, I really have to, put in the work. Granted, I think it's always been clear that the fights in this series have always been secondary to the characters, always been secondary to the story, and always been secondary to the world building. But still, I just we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it when we get there. We start off with a fan request involving Crocodile, and the birds are treating his sand Logia powers as if they were water, because you can tell that they're splashing. They're treating him like a fountain, except he's sand. Last time we saw Crocodile was before the reverie started, after Whole Cake. He was reading a newspaper. We know he's in the New World, we just don't know where. And personally, I would really like to see a team up between him and Doflamingo before the end of the series. So Kamasu did in fact get KO'd by the Rengoku Onigiri. and then the bridge keeper Gyukimaru takes his scythe because he's a weapons collector. So he takes Kamasu's scythe and he walks away. And then Zoro blacks out. And not only does he black out, but later on he actually admits that the wound that he got from the scythe, from Kamasu, was not because he was actually wanting to take the scythe. It was because of his own foolishness. It was because of him being naive. So it wasn't that he was trying to, end the battle or end the fight quickly, or because he wanted to use 3 swords or 3 weapons. Like that legit, like he got caught in that. He admits that in this chapter. So him getting wounded by the scythe was definitely not intentional on his part. And this is further supported by the same chapter where he says, oh man, I got wounded before the final battle. I'm trying to figure out like why he fainted, because unless the blade was poisoned, or had some substance in it that we didn't know about, that we don't know about, like him fainting because of blood loss makes absolutely no sense. I mean, this was the guy who was able to withstand all of Luffy's pain. All right, like Kuma literally gave all of Luffy's pain to Zoro, and he was literally like he was standing in a blast of his own blood by the end. So it cannot be blood loss. Like that just makes absolutely no coherent sense. We then go around Wano and we have Kinemon and Inuarashi making this big deal out of information getting leaked about the crescent moon tattoo and the alliance. The most important part, or the most important aspect out of that little plot point that we get from that sequence is about finding out who the traitor is, who leaked the info. Because there's another part to it where it's like Kinemon saying like, oh my gosh, like our allies are being apprehended, one by one, they're being detained. And we get like the little shots of like these allies being, detained in the capital. In my opinion, that won't really matter all that much, because unless these people, these allies, get sent over to where Beppo and Law's crew are being held, they're probably going to be sent over to Udon, and we know what's about to happen in Udon. I mean, Big Mom is on her way. There's going to be a giant prison break from that thing. So if these allies are sent to Udon, it's like, you'll get them back eventually. It's not a big deal. We get a brief panel of Hawkins and Drake discussing these current developments, these current events, and Drake seems to be a little bit frustrated or angered by Hawkins' comments. But just having these two supernovas together just reminds me of how little we actually know about some of the other characters in this arc that are tied into these two. Like, for example, where's Apu? No information about him, no information about Killer or Kid, no information about Page 1 or the rest of the Flying Six. We go to the Pleasure District to get a scene with Littlefinger, aka Kyoshiro. And apparently Komurasaki's funeral has been cancelled, which there was never going to be one anyway because she didn't die in the first place. But Kyoshiro actually says that he's the one suffering the most from this, and it's like, what, are you talking about like
economically? Like, you mean like because she was like, you know, your prized employee, or do you mean that in an emotional way, that you had feelings for her, had like some kind of a emotional relationship with her?
Because if he's talking about it from like an emotional perspective, right, then I can definitely see, especially what happens at the end of this chapter, sort of hinting at a future confrontation between Kyoshiro and Zoro over Komurasaki. Another thing to remember is that when we first got introduced to Kyoshiro as a character, he was laughing, he was sort of mocking Orochi for being superstitious and believing the prophecy about the 9 samurai showing up to take him down. But now that he actually has one of these pamphlets, one of these cards with the symbol on it, I think that's going to force him to take this threat more seriously, unless he already considered it to be serious in the first place. We go to Ibizu town and we find that Nami has changed outfits and that Sanji's face is swollen up. He actually kind of reminds me of Usopp back in Drum Island when Vivi had to slap him.
There's actually 2 comedic layers that I find more funny than the face itself. The first one is Sanji's dialogue, where he says, "You should always trust your friends," but his face is all swollen, so you know it's probably going to sound something like,
and then Law's trying to walk away from the conversation, and Sanji's trying to stop him. He's like, "No, don't go, Law." But his face looks like a piece of popcorn in that panel. Shinobu tries to blame the leak on Beppo, and so obviously that angers Law, because according to Shinobu's Shinobi code, you know, a ninja like should be ready to die before giving out any information to the enemy. But I mean, that's Beppo. Beppo wouldn't do that. Kind of reminded me of Kizame back in Naruto, where he bit off his tongue after he got defeated by Guy, so that no information would leak out. Tonoyasu shows up into the house, and the way that Oda portrays him in that scene sort of hints at him being the unintentional traitor, or the unintentional, like the person who unintentionally leaked the plans or the symbol of the alliance, simply because he's like really, like he's like out there. Like he's like super rambunctious. He has no filter. He just blurts stuff out. You know, that's just kind of his personality. So I think that's intentional. I think Oda is planting him there to sort of get us to think that maybe like he had something to do with leaking the info. But he can be using Yasu as a red herring as well. Like maybe the person who leaked the info has nothing to do with Yasu, and it's a surprise and it's somebody we don't expect, but Oda wants us to think that it's Yasu so that he can surprise us later. This chapter ends in the land of Ringo, and I'm still trying to figure out why Zoro fainted. Here's the thing. I remember there was this moment back in Punk Hazard where Zoro found out that Luffy had fainted because Caesar had caught him off guard and he had removed the oxygen, so he couldn't breathe, and you know he ended up collapsing. And Zoro was like so hard on him. He was like, "Luffy, what are you doing? Like this is just the beginning of the new world. Don't do that. Like get a grip already. Start taking this thing seriously." But then it's like, and then this happens.
And we know what Zoro's code is. We know that he made a promise when he was defeated by Mihawk to never lose again. And granted, he didn't lose because he defeated his opponent, but he allowed himself to collapse. And I don't get why that happened. I really don't. And again, it cannot be due to blood loss. That doesn't do it for him.
Aside from the scythe possibly being poisoned, there's 2 other narrative reasons for why I think this was allowed to happen. The first one is that maybe Oda wanted us to see the effects of the toad oil. This is a toad oil that Toko was talking about. And this is the toad oil that Usopp was selling back in the first chapter of Wano. You know, he was. But the thing is, though, it may not even do anything because it was Usopp selling it. We know that Usopp is an expert liar, so maybe the oil doesn't do anything. It might do something. I don't know. Maybe it actually has medicinal properties. The second reason for this, though, could be that maybe Oda wants Zoro to go into the final battle with an injury to sort of nerf him a little bit. But then again, Oda could have showed us both of those things. He could have showed us the effects of the toad oil, and he could have given Zoro a limitation or nerf him for the final battle without actually having Zoro faint. So I'm still very, very curious as to why Zoro fainted. This is getting into the realm of sketchy writing. And it's not just the Zoro thing, all right? I'm going to give you a list. So let's crack it down just to show that I'm not a fanboy. I mean, that fanboy train for me is long gone, all right? I guess you could say that I'm a fanboy of good writing. That's what I'm a fanboy of, because I celebrate that when I get it.
But let's crack it down. Sanji raid suit versus page 1. No mention of it. Not even a hint of what happened and how that concluded. No serious explanation about the limitations or lack thereof of sea stone handcuffs on hockey users. Yonko Big Mom losing her memories, bordering on plot convenience, Queen removing Luffy's handcuffs, straight up plot convenience. And it's not like any of these things are bad, by themselves, but it does kind of get you to think, where's this going? Where are we going with this? All I'm saying is this. Writing-wise, Reverie. Brilliant. Amazing writing-wise. Amazing quality for writing. First act of Wano. Amazing. Amazing. Okay? That is those two sections of the story, top tier writing right there. Second act of Wano, I hope it pays off. Now, a lot of you were writing comments last week about the fact that the Black Blade that was mentioned last week was actually mentioned by Mihawk, and it was mentioned during a flashback after Zoro defeats Pika. He remembers Mihawk saying that any blade can become a Black Blade. And the point is to essentially make the blade unbreakable. Now, the Bridgekeeper actually walks away with Chusui, so Zoro's still missing one sword, but he concludes that it's fine because if he's the Bridgekeeper, then he's probably going to be around that area because he protects the bridge. So he'll face him sooner or later. I think it's also very clear foreshadowing that at least one of the two non-black blades that Zoro has will become a black blade. I'm hoping for all three, personally. I mean, Shusui's already black, but I'm hoping that by the end of the series, Zoro can use Santoryu with 3 black blades all around. But primarily, I think the Wado Ichimonji has to be a black blade. I mean, that has to be the unbreakable blade that Zoro ends up imbuing his experience in hockey into, simply because it's the blade of the promise. The Wado Ichimonji is the physical representation of the promise that was made between Zoro and Kuina back when they were kids. This is a shot of the dish that Zoro is devouring in this chapter. It's called Daikonoroshi, and it's made out of essentially like radish. After the end of the chapter, we get a map of Wano with character locations, and it says that Komurasaki is in Ringo with Toko and Zoro, so that pretty much confirms the fact that this lady, who is revealed to be Hiyori in this chapter, is Komurasaki. So Komurasaki equals Hiyori, and I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit weird that we get the revelation this way via a map outside of the chapter, but it does serve as confirmation nonetheless. It's kind of funny how she says, "I'm searching for my older brother, Momonosuke," even though in real time, she would be 20 years older than he is, or that he looks, once they meet up. And that's pretty much the chapter. I was actually very enthusiastic about, the idea of Sanji fighting Queen and Zoro taking on King. But after this chapter, I just don't know. I mean, granted, Zoro did say that Kamasu was strong. He said that in the previous chapter. Boy, this guy's strong. So, and apparently so, because of what happened. Wait, wasn't Zoro eating poisonous food at some point? Wasn't there a mention back in Act 1 that he was ingesting something that wasn't really good health-wise? That he was, there was something about his diet in Wano that was not healthy. I remember that. So yeah, in chapter 912, it is revealed that Zoro has been eating meat that comes from animals that have been drinking the polluted water. Okay, and Tama says that these animals are poisonous to eat. And Zoro does mention, again, in chapter 912, he says, "Oh, no wonder my stomach has been hurting." So he has been eating these poisonous animals, and I'm just going to leave it at that because I don't want to make it seem like I'm damage controlling here. I guess I'll wrap this up with this question. Given how Zoro is right now, do you think that obtaining a black blade in this arc, plus, the eye technique, or the eye, whatever the eye is, coupled with a new black blade, do you think that'll be enough to boost him up to be able to take on First Yonko Commander? That's the question I leave you with. Overall, I thought the chapter was average. It was set up with a pretty obvious reveal by the end. But let me know what you thought about it down below in the comment section. Like the video if you did. Appreciate that. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already for more One Piece related content. I'll catch you guys later. Take care. Bye.